I'm not a big fan of wrestling. I'll bet you're shocked. This can be the wrestling that you find on TV, with all caps in the letters, or this can be the school wrestling that Liam participated in. And what you do not know, because you have seen him here as he has been reading so wide and so tall, is that there was a time in his life that, say in 8th grade, he weighed 65 pounds. And as a mother sitting in the stand, it was all I could do to not go onto the mat and pick up these two tiny little boys by their little singlets and make them sit in opposite corners and say things like, "You will not do that again. You will talk about whatever the issue is like civilized people. And if you cannot do that, you will write a 10-page paper on why someone like Itzhak Perlman is in fact one of the world's greatest heroes. Harumph." I use humor, of course, but I use it because in the Christian church, we have this image. And the image does not contain Jesus of Nazareth wrestling with anybody. We have Jesus of Nazareth perhaps holding a lamb. We have Jesus of Nazareth very gently portrayed. All of our heroes of faith very gently portrayed. And we understand and talk very easily of God in these calm ways that do bring us comfort. And that's part of who God is. That's very real. But there is a wisdom, a powerful and profound wisdom in the Hebrew scriptures and in the Christian scriptures that we tend to want to forget because we try to sterilize life and also God. We're comfortable with that calm part, but we want to be clear. The kind of God that was wrestling with Jacob, this wily, fierce, and as one commentary put it, the God who was willing to dislocate hips if necessary to get the goal accomplished, this is the God who's in life with us as well. God is not so far removed, not so distant, not too holy to be in the struggle with us, to engage with these hard questions, with the uncertainties and the challenges. God is right here in the muck and the middle of it all. The God like that is the one that Jacob needed in life. If you recall, Jacob was from the get-go somebody who was rough and tumble and hard living. He was a scrapper by nature, also by nurture. His poor mom, Rebecca, pregnant with twins, in her womb, they were turning and wrestling. Genesis 25:22 has her saying, the children struggled together. And she said, if it is to be this way, why do I live? Arriving second, he's grabbing at Esau's heel. And Jacob had one maneuver after the next with Esau until he goes too far. And then he runs. And then he begins the whole thing again, maneuvering this time with Laban, until he ends up running again. And this time he has to take his entire family and entourage. His running affects an entire group of people, sending them over. He's alone at night. It sounds familiar, doesn't it? He's alone on the banks of the Jabbok River, being able to run no more. His past has caught up with him, anxiously anticipating this meeting with the twin. And a few weeks back, we read about an anxious Jacob who put his head on a rock at night, and he had a dream about angels going up and down a ladder, and it led him to a vow with God. So just like in that reading, what we can notice is that Jacob may seemingly be alone in the darkness, but an emissary of the divine always is with Jacob. That would be God who is with Jacob. And Jacob, like all of us in these hours of the night, finds that shadow side of himself, the darkest aspects of his life, come out to be examined. The vulnerability of night is when we're most open to our relationship with God. Embodying all of us, Jacob has to wrestle finally with the truth of himself. And in this encounter, Jacob wrestles with the truth that he and Esau are two sides of the same coin. They are now and have always been intertwined. They're perfect twin foils for one another. And Jacob can't find inner peace or achieve redemption or settle anything within himself until he confronts this truth. Jacob is known for his willingness to examine his shadow side. He's constantly struggling and wrestling with these harder parts of his personality and his beliefs and his relationship with the divine. That's what allows for the wholeness to shine through. And because we're allowed to see those shadows and the darkness, we can see that God is always right there by Jacob's side. And we understand the depth of the struggle, and we see the engagement with the angel and the wrestling all night long until the light of the sun comes up at dawn. Jacob neither wins nor loses, and simultaneously he both wins and loses. He refuses to let go, even after he's been injured, even when the pain has to be unbearable, even when the angel insists, "Let me go, dawn is breaking." And Jacob responds, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." The angel blesses Jacob, tells him that from now on he will be Yisrael. He has a commanding power with God and his fellow humans. And Jacob realizes that he has wrestled and struggled and yet persevered. Now, exactly what has happened in this story? There are so many interpretations, starting with that renaming. He is Israel, meaning that God will always prevail, meaning that he has struggled and yet lived. That name that is provided. It can also mean that God, the divine presence that is with Jacob, the one who wrestles and struggles, as long as you are wrestling and struggling, even in the darkness, that continued willingness, the state of wrestling and grappling with the complexities of human experience and existence, that alone is to prevail and be blessed. Others interpret that the angel that Jacob wrestled with during the night, this was actually the angel of Esau, a guardian angel, we might in modern day say. And this might seem to fit with the idea that Jacob needed to confront that foil and engage and examine and literally wrestle with that aspect until dawn. And only then could he confront Esau in the flesh. Others would say that Jacob encountered the angel because he had left something behind, some containers of oil. And a righteous man takes stock of what is his. Only God alone is righteous. Jacob is becoming more righteous and changing his ways. Up until here, Jacob totally not a righteous person. But now he's becoming more in the ways of God. Evidence of this, and all of these, are in that verse 25, when the angel wounds Jacob and puts his hip out of joint. An injury that he will bear forever. He will walk differently. When we wrestle with God, we walk differently. That struggle is a part of us. Priest, writer, theologian Henri Nouwen, in his book, The Wounded Healer, says the hope is that the wound will now be an experience and an injury to heal others, not wound others out of his woundedness. I would add that as Pastor Scott and I have been going through all of these texts over the past weeks, if there's any thought that we are preaching through all of this directed only at a younger audience, all of these things, because these are things that perhaps younger generations deal with. At this point in Jacob's life, he's 90. So at the young age of 90, Jacob is showing us that wrestling with our deepest shadow selves is the hope that we will always have learned something, always something of humility, always in the greatest struggle are places of deep pain. God will meet us, and still we know somehow in our mind's eye we have those images of gentleness, of calm exterior. But life is so messy. And Paul Gauguin in 1888 painted that truth for the Christian church. In Vision After the Sermon, Jacob Wrestling with Angels, this picture, the bottom left-hand side of the painting shows these women wearing their church attire, bonnets and dresses, the Sunday best clothes, and they have one a head bowed and one hands folded in prayer and one looking off in the distance in a state of meditation. And these women give this sense of piety and reverence. And in the upper corner here on the right, you're going to see this red, orange background, an angel and a human engaged in a wrestling match. If you just look at that part of the painting, you'd get this sense of confrontation and strife, maybe feel the anger, the real world and the presented world side by side. Which of these more accurately portrays what's going on for churchgoers? Is it all calm and reverent, just like it appears? Or is this great struggle going on? See, in our lives, there's both. Having met God and found the love of God, the grace of God in the struggle, then we can find that calm. In turn, we can offer that to others, that same kind of love and grace that God offered us. That humble, compassionate, self-giving love. We know what the struggle is like because we've been there. We have striven with God and met God face to face. We can truthfully say things like, remember, if you are here in the middle of a deep wrestling match with God, keep heart and keep holding on. There's a blessing to be found even if the pain is great. In the church, we who look calm on the outside, we're here to offer wisdom and patience, support and encouragement. We can even offer our story, but only if somebody asks, especially if somebody looks like they're limping a bit. So even though I'm not a fan of wrestling, tale to be told, I'm a huge fan of this wrestling story and of the God who taught me to be compassionate, even in the messiness and the darkness of life. God will wrestle with you until the dawn breaks.
Tag in.
Tag in. You're up.
Coming in the ropes. No, I think as we've been going through these stories of Genesis, as Pastor Michelle has been talking about the wrestling, I hope that while we have all these kind of Sunday school felt board stories about Father Abraham had many sons and children march, we are climbing Jacob's ladder. You know, we have all these moments of the patriarchs and their connection to God, all the positive things that happen. But I hope that as we've gone through, you've seen a very real, very human entry into not only Jacob and Abraham and Isaac's family, Rachel, Rebekah, Leah, but also our own households and the places that God finds us in the thin moments where we're not all getting along with our family members, with our coworkers, with our friends, in those places of dissonance and struggle. And in this story, all families at some level have some level of conflict. It might be something minor, you know, maybe you're just on the outs with somebody because you had an argument with your spouse or a sibling, and you get over it. It's no biggie. But maybe, just maybe, there's been sibling rivalries and a brother or sister hasn't talked to you for years. Maybe, just maybe, there's a parent in your life or somebody else in your family's life who has, in their conniving and scheming and all their ways to get ahead, has actually hurt the futures and the possibilities through whatever means of their one-upsmanship, that they've actually hurt their kids' futures through their gambling or through their addiction or through their vices or through their bad business decisions. Maybe, just maybe, in your family you've had the struggle of having to reimagine what family looks like because of infertility. We've seen each of the generations of these stories, the women struggling for years trying to get pregnant, wondering what's wrong with them, wondering what's wrong with their husbands, wondering where's God in all this. Promise, we hope to have children, and there's no little voices here. Or maybe, just maybe, through the secrets and deceptions and lies, maybe you've had a family will opened, or somebody is on their deathbed, and somebody in the family who hasn't been around a while starts to brown nose and kiss up to make sure not only they get their share, but if possible, everybody else's share too. Have you ever had a debate around a will, or around who gets what, and that ugliness that can sometimes surface? I'm not talking about your family, of course, or mine. These are biblical characters back in the day. Oh, there's a wrestling. Have you ever been there, down by the river's edge, wondering, maybe we should invite them to Christmas this year. Maybe I should write a letter. Maybe I should offer an olive branch. It's been too long. Do you think, for those of us who've been caught in between family feuds, do you think maybe I should talk to so-and-so to see if we might be able to get these two back in the room? In those moments when we look in the water's edge and we see what's reflected there and we're uncomfortable with what looks back at us, and we ask God to help us because we don't see it. Remember, these two brothers, Esau and Jacob, saw no way forward. One of them, I'm going to run away and I'm going to leave all this behind. And the other one said, if you come back, you're dead to me. You come back here, as long as Dad's alive, I won't touch you. But as soon as he's gone, I'll kill you. Don't ever show your face around here after what you pulled with me. It's been more than 20 years since Jacob has been home. 20 years with a mom who was close with, who he hung around the tent with, who treasured her little Jacob, and who helped him get the blessing of Isaac. But they haven't spoken in years. the pain of a heartache of a mom who misses her boy, and vice versa. And then there's Dad, Isaac. The last time Jacob was with him, a second son. They're twins, yes, they're born on the same day, but a second son always trying to get Dad's attention because that's my boy Esau. He's a hunter. Did you ever see him shoot a bow? See the trophies on the walls? That's my boy. Chip off the old block. Well, not really in Isaac's case. But Jacob's always trying to get noticed. And the last thing I did to my dad, Jacob, Esau, I'm confused. It sounds like Jacob, but it smells and feels like Esau. Jacob, you wouldn't do this to me, right? It's you, Esau, that I'm blessing, not you, Jacob. Of course you wouldn't. You wouldn't. I know you like to play games, but you wouldn't do this, Jacob. And then there's the main feature of today's show, right? There's Esau getting into the ring, 400 men with him. You took my birthright, you took my blessing, you're persona non grata in my life. I don't want to see you anymore. I'll kill you. But they're twins. I got twins. Do they have love-hate relationships? Sometimes, sure. Do they fight like cats and dogs? Sometimes, sure. But then there's those moments when they're growing up, when they're sucking each other's thumbs and sharing each other's popsicles, and it's disgusting. Here, you want some? Sure. Here. Gross. They talk each other's languages. And when push comes to shove and there's some bully on the playground, they stick up for each other. They're brothers. That's got to mean something, right? There was some good times in there too. And all that's churning up. Pastor Michelle talked about the different interpretations of that wrestling. I'd like to offer one more. It's daybreak. Time's run out, Jacob. Esau's here. I'm not letting you go because I can't face him without you. Bless me. You promised you'd bring me peace. I don't have peace here with my own flesh and blood. Again, it's back in scriptural times. None of us have an estranged son or daughter or brother or sister who's upset because we married somebody outside the faith or somebody with a different skin color or something that we did long ago or somebody came out and no, I'm not, and there's not any resolution. There's no peace. Day breaks. And here comes Esau. This happens in the church too. I know I've shared this once before, and it was a daily devotion if you're checking out those. But John, my first call, 2 years in, John was on every board you can imagine. He was 85 years old when this story happened. But previous to my knowing him and serving the church, he'd been on council and consistory and served as the head of the stewardship campaign to do an expansion on the church and buildings and grounds. And he was a head usher, and he was a decorated World War II veteran. If you're in this church community, think Larry Bryan or Nick Costanzi or Ron Gales or all those men and pillars of faith who third generation founding family of the church. And John and I had a good relationship until I suggested with the mission and outreach board, let's start night ministry as a church. Let's get out of the suburb. Let's go downtown. Let's go into Pilsen and Lawndale and Humboldt Park. Let's work with the night ministry, their RV, and we'll serve food and soup to those on the streets. And we'll get out of our comfort zone and really seek to love our neighbor by being with our different neighbors who have different experiences, different backgrounds than us. And John didn't come to church for 3 weeks in a row. He didn't usher, something I'd never seen him do in 2 years. Somebody came up to me after church and said, "Pastor, can you talk? John is upset with you. He doesn't like what you're doing in the church. What do you mean? He doesn't like what I'm doing in church. He doesn't like this night ministry stuff. I mean, we left the city when the neighborhood changed, and he says he's not coming back. He's not giving. He's not going to usher anymore. He says that there's enough people in Palos and Orland and Evergreen. Why can't we help these folks? Why can't we help our folks? We don't need to go down there and help those people. Whatever baggage John was carrying from his own past experiences. So I called him up. John, this is Pastor Scott. Click. Dial tone. I thought, maybe, an older guy, maybe he's fumbling around, maybe phone fell off or got disconnected. Maybe it was on my end, so I called him back. John, it's Pastor Scott. I'd like to talk to you. And before I could get the words out of my mouth, I don't like what you're doing. Church doesn't have any business going downtown. We got our own needs right here, plenty of them. I don't want you getting us involved with those folks. And before I could say, John, let's talk about this. John, what do you mean? John, what's this all about? He hung up the phone again. And when I called again, he didn't answer. A couple months went by. I tried again. I guess maybe he had caller ID. I don't know. He didn't pick up again. I wrote him a letter. About 6 months later, we get a call from the hospital saying John is at Christ Hospital and he's had a heart attack. He's not doing well. Could we come see him? And I prayed, and like Jacob and Esau said, there's just a lot of history here. There's a lot of pain. I know I've caused some for him, so to my associate, could you go? And I think he'll receive you. You have a good relationship still. He's still talking to you. Go. And he went and prayed with John, came back, said, Scott, you really need to pray about it some more. I think you should go. I said, if I go, these guy's got heart trouble. I'm going to add to this. I don't think he wants to see me. He made it clear he doesn't want to talk to me. And to be honest, I'm kind of upset with him now. I got my own issues now with this guy and whatever he's carrying and these grudges and feels very prejudiced. I mean, I know he grew up in a different experience, different neighborhood, different time. I'm trying to cut him slack, but he hung up on me 3 times. Okay, all right, I'll pray about it. Second day, he goes back, comes back. You really need to consider going back and seeing what you can do to pray with John. So finally, very biblically, third day, I drove to Christ Hospital, and I'm dreading it. Very much like Jacob, I think, prodigal son coming home. I don't want to be, I'm not even your son anymore, just a servant. I'm thinking of all the things I can say to John like we do. We go through the past conversations, we remember them almost verbatim 20 years later, and we are thinking of all the things we could have or should have or would have said, and so I go into that room, and I say, John, are you awake? There he is, laying on the bed. He said, Pastor. I said, John, I'm sorry. I know we've had some differences. And he said, Pastor, I'm sorry. I was wrong. And he starts to apologize to me. And in that moment in the hospital room, there were tears, both of us. I forgive you. Like these 2 men who, even before Jacob can get the words out of his mouth, his brother, who he thought was there with his 400 guys, by the way, and his servants said, this looks like trouble, divides up all his parties so just in case there's damage control, some of them can get away. Before he can even speak the word, like the father running off the porch, he wraps his arms around him, kisses him, and says, I missed you. Who are all these people? A lot's changed. It's good to see you, brother. And Jacob says, I hope you heard this in the Hebrew, take my blessings. All these sheep and goats and camels I've sent, take my blessing. I took yours. Take my blessing, please. Esau says, no, yours have been good to me. Time has healed some of that. I've got more than enough. Jacob insists, no, take my blessing. Some past regrets in that statement. Verse 10. And verse 11, one of the most powerful verses in all of Scripture. Because, brother, to see your face, remember he just saw God's face in the wrestling, so there's a parallel. To see your face is to see the face of God. As I was driving home, the church office called me. Said, Scott, have you gotten to Christ Hospital yet to see John? I said, yeah, I'm just driving back. And the secretary said, thank God, because the hospital just called. I was 15 minutes away. And John just died. He's gone. And I know that some of you listening out there, as we've been talking through this text, you've been thinking about specific people in your life. Specific people in your family, at your job, at church, friends that you've had the outs with who were once good friends. And there's a wrestling. God, bless me in this, because I don't know how they're going to receive it. I don't know if I come back like Jacob and say, brother, if they're going to say, get out. Because it's not always a happy ending, is it? Some of us have tried. And the last thing I'd like to share with you is two small pieces. One, I always think about the Apostle Paul when I think about the wrestling. And Paul says in Romans 12, live in harmony with one another. Let your love be genuine. Hate what is evil. Hold fast to that which is good. And he goes through all these dynamics of relationship. And then he says at the very end, as much as it depends upon you, live at peace with everyone your life is connected with. Now that's really an important phrase. As much as it depends on your power, do everything in your power with God, your relationship with the others in your life to find healing, to offer reconciliation, to be open to it. But it doesn't say that you're going to know how they're going to receive it. You've never had control over that. And that's why the prayer and wrestling with God is so important. Be with me in this. Because when Jacob wakes up at dawn, he's ready. He's wrestled with everything he's been, but no matter what happens, whether Esau mows him down and cuts him through and takes that revenge that he's verbalized to Jacob and his anger and just rips him a new one, or they find a different way forward in peace, which Jacob is hoping for. Either path, or somewhere in between, Jacob knows this. God is with him. And he has a peace with what he's wrestled with. It's not going to hold him anymore. The last thing I'll say, and it's that story with John, is why I bring it up again. As a pastor, I do a lot of memorial services, a lot of burying people. And in ministering to the families and friends around that grave, too many days I hear, I wish I would have said these things. I wish we could have found a way forward. I haven't talked to Dad in 10 years. And now I can't say it. I can say it to him in spirit, but I wish in the days we had had. And I almost missed that with John. And I'll share this truth in finality with you. While as much as it's dependent on me in my family relationships, my friend relationships, I still have family and a few friends who say, even if it's not direct between me and them, maybe I'm caught in that family feud of I'm on the wrong side of the family. We don't talk to that side. And by association of being so-and-so's son or daughter, no. But as much as it depends upon us, with God we go. May God be with you in the wrestling and in the hopes for reconciliation.